Just a little bit, so I might do it.
Go ahead. Just turn it on and just push the button and the amber light will come on.
Okay. I don't have the strongest voice at the best of times, but a little worse right now, I think. I learned a few things in our trip up here. The latest thing is I need one of these dry erase boards. That's pretty handy. Maybe get one of those out in the mission work and use that thing. Enjoyed the Sunday school lesson, Brother Chuck. That's a pretty sometimes divisive portion of Scripture right there, and he did well with that. I enjoyed that. Well, I'm going to try to do so that I don't just ramble on like I mentioned earlier and try to keep my thoughts organized. Usually when I talk about the mission work, I try to do a Bible lesson as well. It's a sermon that I've been working on, and I wrote a lot of it this morning actually, but the title of it is Delivering from Death. So it goes along with a little bit with what Brother Justin was preaching on yesterday. I enjoyed his sermon. He's talking about if you can't be faithful living, and how you gonna be faithful when you die for the Lord. You know, we kind of expect that though, don't we? Sometimes, and that's what mine is. The sermon's kind of similar to that, delivering from death. So the mission work is sponsored by Indoor in Clay County, West Virginia. We're very near the geographic center of a very oddly shaped state. But we're right in the middle of the state. We're about an hour east of Charleston, in case you don't know where Clay County or Indoor is. I've been pastoring there for a little over 19 years now. And it don't seem possible, does it? The 19 years, that's how long I've been there. I think we started in August of 03, I think. And I preached for, 6 or 8 months before that, just off and on for them. So we're near 20 years there, and we felt like the Lord was leading us somewhere else to do something different. So I thought about the different churches that needed a pastor, and we kind of prayed about that a little bit. And and these are things that I've been kind of mulling over for a year or two. And we've been out west a few times, and noticed that we noticed the lack of churches, that there's just doesn't seem to be that many out there. Of course, the population is a lot more widespread, so you wouldn't expect to see a church building at every intersection. Just the population spread out. There's quite a few in the towns and the cities when you go to look for them, but we couldn't, as far as we could determine, we couldn't find any churches of like precious faith. We chose the name Wyoming Anabaptist because when I say that I'm looking for a church that demonstrates those characteristics and qualities, the beliefs, the practices of our Baptist forefathers. And I couldn't find any like that out there, or very few. In some states, not at all. So we thought about going to, our first inclination was to go to South Dakota. And because we couldn't, we didn't know of anything, and we loved that area when we drove through it, and there wasn't anywhere really to go to church when we were out there. But property got real expensive during COVID, and South Dakota is one of those places that just went kind of through the roof. There just wasn't any inventory available for people to buy, and if something did come on the market, you better make an offer over asking price, and then they might accept it, but it needed to be in pretty quick. So that we couldn't afford that. We looked a little bit at Montana, and then we settled on Wyoming, where the property hadn't spiked so much in price. And we did some looking around and research, and couldn't locate a church. The closest one that we could find that had previously been, at least in the area we were looking at, was the one that Brother Justin Fulton used to pastor there in Colorado Springs in Colorado. But we couldn't find anything actually in the state. And I talked to Brother Justin later, and he told me that there's been some churches that have tried to start some mission works out there, but they haven't been real successful. and they haven't endured. I hope that's not the same with us, but there are any number of Baptists. The research I did showed about 80 different Southern Baptist works in the state of Wyoming. Again, maybe I'm getting off track a little bit. We settled in Wyoming because that's a place that we could afford property. We looked around, and what we found that looked ideal to us is in Bosler, which is a little bit north of Laramie, and it's still in the southeast corner of Wyoming. And we found a piece of property that used to serve as a gas station, and then later I think as just a service station for working on vehicles, and had tow trucks and things like that. But even talking to the people out there, nobody really remembers when it last operated, but probably in the 70s. The buildings are rather old, but there was a little 800, 900 square foot house. There was a connecting I never can remember what breezeway that connected the house to the separate service station building, and in that breezeway they had the bathrooms. If you can remember how service stations used to be, we got one that just celebrated its 100th anniversary not too far from us. It's an old service station. It used to be an Esso. It's been around forever, but it's kind of the same principle. People pulled up and they pumped the gas for them, Then they'd get out and walk over to the bathrooms and whatever. They'd get the oil added and things like that. So that's what this little store was, is the storefront where you paid for your gas and bought your necessaries for the vehicle. And then it had this connecting breezeway that had the bathrooms in it. And it's not, it wouldn't be the place you'd pick if you're just going somewhere to build a house or to fix up a house to live in. But for us, it worked pretty good because it's on US 30. It's about 25 miles from Laramie, but it's a 4-lane highway. And actually where the house is, we actually have a connecting road that connects north and southbound traffic. So you can cross over coming from either direction. They've maintained that all these years. I mean, the asphalt in front of the house is new with the latest paving of the highway. I mean, they just keep paving it, and they've been doing that. They maintained the power to the building, and I don't know why they did that, but we didn't have to go through any hoops or anything. We just had the powers across the highway, but somebody had paid the fee to keep the line across the highway for 15 years since the last time somebody tried to work on it. And then the well, it actually had water in the well, which is kind of rare for there as well. But it didn't work when we bought it, and we made an offer based upon the contingency that the well would be functioning. I couldn't get anybody to check it for me, and the window was so small between October and December of last year and the closing date was in December. I talked to a fellow that did wells out there, and he said, "I worked on that thing 20 years ago." He said, "If it had water then, it's got it now." So I said, "Okay, I'll take that." And so we went ahead and proceeded with the offer. One thing that had me concerned is we found an empty box from a well pump. If we're going down inside a 4-inch casing, there was I found an empty box in the house where somebody had replaced the pump, and they still didn't work. But that guy that worked on wells, he said, they probably didn't hook it up right. Yeah. So and he was right. We had somebody come out and look at it. The well's only I think it's 65 feet deep is all it is. It's not that deep. And mine in West Virginia is deeper than that. But the water's not the best. But we have got water treatment on it now, and he put the well pump in there. It works. So you tick these things off. It had good location as far as visibility, a 4-lane highway. It had electric available. It had water available. The house was old, like I said, but somebody 15 years ago had started remodeling it, and they had put a new roof on it. So when we went inside to look at it, it was all dry inside. There was one spot where there was a leak, but that was pretty obvious why they had a leak there. And it was on one corner of the house, but the rest of it was all dry. Our biggest obstacle, I don't know if Roger encountered that too much there, but our biggest obstacle really in getting the place ready was skunks had been living under the house. And I know he had that at the trailer park too. And that was really hard to get rid of. And even now, it's in certain places on the outside, when you come up to the building, you might catch a whiff of skunk. But we had to, it just got in, and they weren't there anymore, they were gone. But we eventually had to pull up all the floor in part of the house and put down some lime and plastic and then refloor it just to try to breathe in there. It was just, and I didn't realize that when we made our offer. The place was full of dead leaves. One door had been busted out, and there'd been pronghorn antelope in there and all kinds of stuff. And I thought, well, it's just all of this, and birds. I said, that's what I'm smelling, is all of that wild animal smell. But after you cleaned all that out, you realized it was skunk. That's what it was. But we've got that pretty much taken care of, and so now we're at the point where we can live in the house, and the attached building or semi-attached building. The workers took to calling it the chapel, so that's what we're calling it now. The chapel building we can use it. It doesn't have plumbing or anything in it, but it does have electric. We need to rebuild some bathrooms because we had to tear the old ones down. So we haven't got that far yet. But we can stay out there now and live in it. If you come out again, Roger, we can fix you up a bed in one of the rooms, because we got all but 2 rooms finished inside the house. But that's the building part of it and the location of it. We put up a big sign. We've had a lot of interest from people just stopping by, asking what an Anabaptist is. Our brother here has done some research. I was talking to him a little bit about that, and there's a lot of people that will. They see that up on the sign. I had one fellow stop, and he just wasn't even a Baptist or anything. He had already done the research, and he wanted to know, why we were using that name and what that meant for the church. So I got to talk to him about that for a while. But we've had a number of Southern Baptists stop by. And another Baptist place in town that's not Southern Baptist. People have stopped and we've talked to them. And here's what we found out. Because it's not, the mission work and going out there is not about the building, and it's not about the location, the project and all that. It's really about the people. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to meet with the people, and we do that as much as we can when we're out there. We talk to people and witness to people. And what we found out is that there's just not much. They don't know much about churches. They don't know much Catholicism, Lutheran are probably the 2 biggest out there, and then Mormonism has gotten big as well. Although I haven't encountered that much, but they say that that is pretty big in Wyoming. But even the Baptists just don't know anything about the church. They don't know church history. They really just. It's how Brother Justin Fulton and I, when we were talking, that's how we kind of described it. It's just they almost take their political or social ideology and they apply it to organized religion. So if you're really liberal, Catholic might be your way to go. And I know that not all Catholics are like that, but it gives you a little more control over your beliefs and when and where to do whatever, and you can always make up for it, later if you by doing as the priest tells you to do, and then if you have a little bit more conservative view of things, you could be you could be Presbyterian or you could be Lutheran. But the really strictest ones, they figure, well, we got to be Baptist, and that's kind of how because that's kind of historically, that's their perception of Baptists, and that's what they see on the news about the Southern Baptists. They see them boycotting Disney and doing this or that, and they'll say, well, if we got the same kind of viewpoints, then we probably should align ourselves with the Baptists. That's really the extent of it. They don't believe that the Baptist churches descend through the Anabaptists all the way down from the time of Christ till now. So we've got a chance to talk to some folks about that. We've had church services pretty regular since we've been since I put the sign up, which was that was right when Brother Roger left out there. I think the day him and Matthew left, they delivered that sign, and I stuck around. It was after you left, actually, so I stuck around and put that sign up. Which, by the way, I just got a letter from the county. Apparently that sign's illegal. I didn't apply for a permit, so hopefully they're not going to be too much of a stickler on that. But there's some kind of fine for putting it up without permission. I had no idea. But anyway, that's out of all the counties in Wyoming, Albany County, where we're at, and the one where Jackson is, and the whole Jackson Hole area. Those are probably the 2 most liberal counties, because we have the University of Wyoming in our county. But they're still mostly just cowboys and ranchers and farmers. It's pretty conservative. Their idea of liberal is nothing like what it is in much of the rest of the country. So even the Democrats really don't relate well to Democrats in other parts of the country. But anyway, once we got that signed up, we've been trying to have services pretty regular. Whenever we're out there, we have it. This past Sunday is the first time since, I don't know, well, probably since the beginning, that I haven't either had church out there or here at Indoor back in West Virginia. And we've had the people that have attended are the people that have been helping us on the building. But I've had somebody there for the last 4 services. We've had people visiting with us. So I just pray that continues. The folks they're fiercely independent, which so are mountaineers. So are people in West Virginia. So I'm used to that. But they're used to also doing things on their own, and so organized religion is something that not many are well acquainted with. And not something that they participate in regularly. They'll do Bible studies from house to house and things like that. It's the ones that that are looking for truth, I think, which was a good point. I think that's what separates those that love the Lord from those that are the pretenders, is the search for truth, the desire for it, the absence of the recognized absence of something necessary and meaningful, and that drives and brings men and women to Christ. Others will look other places if they're not led by the Spirit. They'll look other places. But even the ones that are interested in learning the truth, they'll assemble together and they'll speak often one to another, and they fear the Lord. That there's some of that out there, but just not in the context of serving in the church. So that's our main objective. That's our main goal, is to just talk to people about the Lord. I generally start by talking about the beautiful scenery, the beautiful creation, and how this indicates and testifies of a Creator. And everybody almost goes along with you on that. You'll talk about the weather, and then you'll talk about how that all of these troubles that are going on around us they become insignificant when compared to this huge, vast creation and this God that made us in the eternal state of a man's soul. That's the most important. And so I kind of point folks in that direction. That's what we talk about. And so just pray for us. There's a lot of physical work left to be done, but the spiritual labors are also, we got a lot to do. We have people that we want to be good witnesses to. I'm not a gifted speaker or preacher, so I'm not going to attract people in with fancy sermons and things like that. So I think mainly our influence and our success amongst the people is going to be found in our interactions. So, and to be honest, I'm not good at that either. I've always been more of a solitary private sort, but I love to talk about the Lord, but sometimes it's hard to initiate that conversation. So pray for us in that regard, because I think that's where we'll find our most success. One of the ladies in Idaho told me, she said, "Well, you're not a fire and brimstone preacher." I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Well, that actually will go over well in Wyoming," because that's where she was from. And she said that in Wyoming, that's what they'll want. They don't want somebody, beating them over the head and telling them that they have to do this or that, but they do respond better to those sorts of interactions. So pray for us that we can be a good witness, that the Lord would save souls. That's the aim. That's the goal. Well, primarily, of course, the aim or the goal is to glorify the Lord, but we see that in the salvation of souls. That's the greatest miracle that the world's ever seen, that the Lord would, that Jesus Christ would die for the sins of his people, and that a soul was saved. And that's remarkable. My text is over in Proverbs chapter 24, and this is what we're doing. By God's grace, we're attempting to deliver some from death. And over in Proverbs chapter 24, it says in verse number 11, "If thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death, and those that are ready to be slain, if thou sayest, Behold, we knew it not, doth not he that pondereth the heart consider it? And he that keepeth thy soul, doth not he know it? And shall not he render to every man according to his works?" Well, you could apply that on a grand scale, and you could say maybe that's the state of affairs in our country. when we know the truth and we fail to share it. We see souls dying, and we see souls being captured in the snares of the devil, and we do very little to oppose the efforts of the devil and others. And the one that sees all things, he knows. He ponders our hearts. He knows what opportunities we recognized and failed to follow through. He knows what effect we might have had and that we failed to bring to bear against the enemies of the gospel. He knows all of this, and there's not anything that we're going to hide from him. There's not any excuse that we're going to be able to give our God. It seems like it'd be a noble endeavor for any man or any woman to deliver them that are drawn unto death, like it says in our text. In better times, in better places, amongst better men than where we live today, this attitude and this philosophy might be one that's admired or even sought after. To deliver them that are drawn unto death, to come to the rescue of someone. That'd be an admirable desire to have, and a high quality characteristic. And in other places, that might have been the case. And I think in our country, in years gone by, in generations previous, this has been the case. But in our place and in our time, amongst the people that we live amongst, it just isn't the case. It's not an admirable thing. It's not an objective that people have to deliver them that are drawn unto death. In our place and time, you really find out that even life itself isn't much valued. There's not much store set by even the value of a life, unless you think of it in a selfish manner. You know, amongst those that have power or positions of authority, or they got they have the means to do so. These folks, they're pretty selfish about their own lives, but not about the lives of others. You can see that through COVID. You can see that there's some that had a high regard for their own survival, but not much for others. And if one of the sad effects of such a pandemic and these epidemics is that you can see that there becomes less and less a value placed on lives. It just is not that valuable. Now, there's a higher and higher degree of importance placed upon control and manipulation, but very little on the value of a life. For those of us that are saved, though, this is an ambition that ought to drive us onward. The aim and purpose, to deliver from death. Saved men and women, those that have been called out by God, those that are called into the cause of righteousness, we have great capacity for good. This is a world full of evil and bad, but we have great capacity for good, not because of who we are, but because of the one that lives within us. And because of the authority that he grants unto us, because of the might or the strength that he gives to us. God gives us the privilege and the ability to, by his grace and through his word, he gives us the ability to deliver the dying from death, to deliver the depraved from destruction, and to deliver the desperate from despair. We live in a world that's full of despair, and people are desperate. We can give them something to find hope in, someone to trust in, and that's what we can do. And we do that here in West Jefferson. We try to do that in West Virginia. We want to do that in Wyoming. There's a whole new group of people there that I hope to, be able to speak to and talk to, preach to, minister to, that maybe haven't heard these, even a glimmer of this truth that we take for granted. And the hope and the peace that we have in our hearts just isn't theirs by and large. And so no wonder they're full of despair. If you look at this in practical terms, let's think about that just for a minute. I'll go through these points real quick. This won't take very long. But if you think about this, our text, it says, he says that thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death. The first thing that I think of usually is you think of it in practical and mortal terms. So I think about delivering the innocent. One of the first things you think of is the aborted babies. How long is the Lord going to suffer a nation to continue that hasn't stood up and said something against and opposed and eradicated this movement to kill the babies? If thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death, I don't know. Even when I see this, I know that that's not what the word drawn intends here. But I kind of think about how they pull a baby out of the womb and they draw and quarter it. They just cut it in pieces, and that's awful. They're drawn unto death. They're just broken up in pieces, and they're ready to be slain. They're ready to be slain because their parents don't want them, and they have no use for them because they're an obstacle to their success or to they're a stumbling stone to their the path that they want to trod. So they get rid of this baby. If we forbear to do that, and if we pretend that we didn't know, isn't he that pondereth the hearts? Isn't he going to know it? The one that keeps us, the one that preserves us, isn't he going to know that we didn't participate in the preservation of others? Isn't there going to be an account due at some point? And shall not he render to every man according to his works? But what I was thinking of mainly on this, when we think about if thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death, I was thinking about the status or the place that man holds in God's creation. Somebody talked about that yesterday, that we're made in the image of God, made in the likeness of God. You can see that over in Genesis chapter number 1 and verse 26 and 27. The entire creation is spoken into existence. Man is formed from the dust of the ground, and he's made in the image of God. There's something different about that. The angels, even though they're mightier and better than us, and we wouldn't dare to compare ourselves to them, they were made in the same day that the stars and the heavens were made. I think that's how I see it. But man is made here, and it's almost like a separate part of the creation on the sixth day of creation, and that's who he. So what I'm thinking of. Is how that man holds this place in God's creation, not to think more of ourselves than we deserve, but how dare we find trivial the lives of those men and women. Now this is we ought not forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death. It says over in Genesis chapter number 9, and this is what the Lord told Noah and his sons after the flood. He says in verse number 5, he says, and surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. And at the hand of man. At the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. So if you want to have a reason to preserve life, or to prevent those that, willfully and casually and for no cause destroy life, if you want to have a reason to oppose them, it's because man is made in the image of God. I mean, even in the act of administering justice to the lives of men, and you have capital punishment in such a case. It better be when there is truly cause, and the evidence should be overwhelming. And we know that, in the Mosaic law that you had to be under the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. This is a monumental thing to take a life. Good men and women, from the perspective of mankind, should be men and women who defend the young, who defend the ancient, the helpless, the innocent, and the wrongly accused. This is what we do. And again, in a very practical way, that's what our text is telling us. He says, if thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death. The idea is here, or at least the thought is implied, that there is some ability that we possess to deter such an action. It's implied here. If you fail to deliver them, it implies that you must have some ability or capacity to prevent such from death. Well, we do. We need to stand up and speak out for those that might not be able to speak for themselves. No cost should be spared in protecting innocent lives from the brutalities of the cruel. Over in Matthew chapter 10, here's another passage to remind you of the value of the human life. It says in verse 29, are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. Now, I know that's speaking directly to the elect, but when you combine that with what the Lord told Moses told Noah back there in Genesis chapter number 9, there is a value placed on human life that cannot be selectively applied. All men are made in the image of God in the sense that that's the image that we bear. Now, it's a broken and flawed image. We know that. Brother Chuck brought that out. I didn't know if everybody would agree with you on the trichotomous part or not, but I agree with you on that. I think that's what the image of God is. That's how Adam was made: body, soul, and spirit, which in some ways reflects the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. But he's born into this world since that fall. I mean, his spirit died. It died. When in the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die. In that day, well, he didn't fall over dead, but something died, because that's what the Lord said. So the spirit died. So that's how we're born into this world as the sons and daughters of Adam. Now Jesus Christ is not, because he's not the son of Adam in that sense. But the rest of us are born into the world in that sense, and we have this. We're in the image of God, but we're body and soul with a dead spirit, a broken and dead spirit. And so what I'm saying is that even all of humanity bears the image of God, at least to that degree. So we have this calling, I think, to place a value on life and deliver those that are drawn unto death. If you apply it spiritually, this is a even greater task that we have, responsibility to deliver the souls from death. That's the spiritual application. They're even now being drawn unto death. We see it all around us. We see men and women caught in the snares and in the web of deceit and the lies of Satan, and they're following after. Nobody's really, COVID's revealed this also. People just won't think for themselves, and they won't seek out the truth of the matter, and they're willing to be led to the slaughter. And in a spiritual sense, the cost is immense. It's the eternal souls of men being gathered up and hunted down and taken to the slaughter. And we see it happening all around us. This is the spiritual duty of the church, is to warn others and tell them, and to the best of our ability. We don't know which ones are the elect of God, so we seek to deliver them, every one. Deliver them that are drawn unto death. The world is indiscriminate in its passion. Any soul, anytime, anywhere, they will hunt it, they will seek it, they will draw it down into the pits of hell. Doesn't matter if it's a good sinner, somebody that lives a relatively good life, or a bad sinner. Doesn't matter if they're young, old, rich, or poor. The devil will take them all. That's his aim. That's his goal, and he's indiscriminate in his pursuit of the souls of men. We who know the Lord should be about the business of saving these souls. Not that we save them ourselves. You guys, you understand where I'm coming from. This is the task given to the church. Brother Grigsby said yesterday he had a perfect record. He'd never saved a single soul. And that's true. If your record is marred in that regard and you think there's one or two there that you saved yourself, then you're just fooling yourself. But our goal is to preach the gospel to everyone, because God can save whichever one it is his will to save. He cannot be prevented. And even though the devil seems powerful, and the powers of darkness seem to be in ascendancy right now, and seem to exceed the powers of right and good, the end result is inevitable. God is invincible. He will prevail, and that's the side we're on. So though we might sometimes be a little depressed, and it's no wonder the world can be absolutely despaired, when they think about in their own minds, that they try to ponder a way out of the mess and try to think of a way to make themselves appealing to God and escape the snares of the devil. It's no wonder they're in absolute despair. We ourselves are a little depressed sometimes, I think, because we forget that God's in control. We have that confidence, I think. Over in Proverbs 14 and verse 25, it says, "A true witness delivereth souls, but a deceitful witness speaketh lies. In the fear of the Lord is strong confidence, and his children shall have a place of refuge. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of life." So if you encounter someone that is in a desperate place and they're in fear of death, Direct them to the fountain of life.
Amen.
These two are diametrically opposed. Life from Jesus Christ, death from ourselves and from the powers of the devil. But life will ultimately prevail without doubt, and in the lives, in the individual lives of those that are destined for salvation, they must be saved, they must be preserved. Well, would to God we could be the tools used in that, because he's going to do it. And whether it's, here or West Virginia or Wyoming, just that the Lord would use us. It's no big thing that I'm doing. All I'm doing is what the Lord has given the power and authority to every one of his churches to do, and the individual church members in an individual fashion. And even those, maybe even outside of the churches, would have a sort of a mandate to share the gospel with others. They don't have the official authority that we have in the church, but the very least they can do is share their knowledge of Jesus Christ with others. There's a saying, now I looked it up, it's sometimes attributed to Edmund Burke, but I think I read somewhere that it may not be his at all. There's a saying that says the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. You can see that kind of shortened, and sometimes other people refer to it maybe in a condensed fashion, but the idea is that evil will triumph when good people are silent. There's more to it than that, of course, but it is pretty damning, I think, in our generation and others, when we don't speak out against evil. If good men do nothing, there is a cost. The cost is felt and paid by the good men that stand idle. We lose our liberties, if you look at it from a political perspective. But from a spiritual perspective, it's even far worse. It affects us somewhat, because we're not what we ought to be. Those of us that are saved, we're not what we ought to be. We're missing something. We're missing out on an opportunity and a privilege that would bring more happiness and joy to our ministries and to our personal witness if we were faithful to warn others about the evil all around us. When we stand by and do nothing, we're not what we could have been. But the price is a lot higher and a lot steeper for the ones that we don't witness to, the ones that are left unwarned. I was going to read to you there in Ezekiel about how that Ezekiel was he was the watchman. And if he spoke up and warned the people and they repented and turned from their evil and they followed the Lord, well, good. Those folks would live. If he spoke up and they didn't repent, well, they would die, and they would die in their sins justly, but Ezekiel would have delivered his own soul, because he did what he was supposed to do. Amen. To stand for good and right, there must be men and women who are just and righteous. You can't expect the politicians to stand up and stand for good and right, because they're not. They're neither. They're not neither good nor right. But the ones that are the people of God, we should be. Not because, again, of who we are, but because of who it is that lives within us. We have so much to share, so much to give to others. We need to set an example that leads some to life and that inspires the ones that are saved to live lives that are better than what they're living now. From a moral and physical perspective, from the perspective of a society of men, the cost of injustice and murder will deprave further and further the more that we stand silent, and eventually justice itself will fall in the street. Life will be lightly esteemed, and sinful behaviors will be more and more imitated if we stand by and say nothing. But the cost to the souls of men is far worse. For ourselves, the failure to act on behalf of the souls of men is catastrophic. Souls are taken and destroyed, and many who know the Lord will turn a blind eye. The Lord won't stand idly by while his people stand there and do nothing. I'm not saying any soul is ever going to be lost that was intended to be saved, but you don't know who they are. You don't know who they are. I think as a result of our standing silent will result in a sense of callousness in the hearts and minds of God's people. There's going to be a loss of rewards for God's people that ought to be proclaiming the gospel. I sincerely think, the Lord said when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth? And it goes along with what Brother Justin preached. I think he's going to find in some ways a finer and more pure faith. I expect that the Lord's going to raise up in these last days a generation of saints who are more fearless than what we've been. The ones that this is going to be the last generation of saints, I think, here on the face of the earth. And when we haven't done what we've ought to have done, he's going to raise up some that will be able to stand, even the fires of trial, that maybe we didn't. And they're going to do it. And they're going to speak out. They're going to speak out against the evil. They're not going to be mean. They're not going to be bitter, but they're going to be bold. They're going to be full of compassion for the lost. And I think that's what we ought to aspire to ourselves. Over in 1 Thessalonians chapter number 5 and verse number 14, Paul says, "Now we exhort you, brethren, warn them that are unruly, comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, be patient toward all men. See that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men." We owe that to the world to follow that which is good, Amen. To be an example. The cost to us is that the ministry will be carried on by someone else if we don't do it. And we're going to be left with a mediocre character at best, a mediocre witness at best, when we should be the ones that try to shine the brightest in such a dark world, not for our own glory, but because we know the inevitable success of the Word of God. That even if it costs us our lives, if there's one more soul that he intends to save through our ministry, through the witness that we deliver, then so be it. I mean, he's going to win, and that soul's going to be saved. We just want to be used in the accomplishing of it. Amen. We have a job and a vocation that guarantees success, only it's not always or entirely like we expect to see it. It's not always what we desire or we want, but success and final victory is guaranteed. The success that is guaranteed is that success of God's will and God's purposes. If Christ hasn't come back yet, then we will dare to presume that there are souls yet to be saved. And if there are souls yet to be saved, we can dare to presume, because as helpless and small, as incapable as we are, we're the tools that he's going to use. And he can do great things even with us. So that's where I'm going to stop. I appreciate your time. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Paul.
I never had a problem with that at all.